Una mañana.
Alabim, alaban, alabim, kurban. Alabim, alaban, alabim, kurban. Okladim, okladak, okladitatak. Alabim, alaban, alabim, kurban.
Radio reloj. 5 de la mañana.
No todo lo que es oro brilla. Remedio chino e infalible.
Hello, welcome everyone. So I've been in the chat messaging you all. My name is Margaret Bishop. I'll be doing some of the Zoom logistics for this session. So definitely let me know if you have any questions that come up. I am the Cast of Basic Needs Coordinator and on the Harvest Festival planning team. So just for some housekeeping, please remain muted with your video off to maximize our Zoom quality and bandwidth. And we have Carmen Cortez with us from the Community Agroecology Network, and she'll be joining us to offer Spanish interpretation services for anyone who needs them. So on the bottom right-hand corner, there should be an interpretation option that you can click on to opt into getting Spanish interpretation. From there, you will be able to hear Carmen's interpretation, be able to turn down or completely off the main audio. If you're running into any issues, please private message either Carmen or I in the chat function. And I think Carmen is already repeating that for folks. So if you go to the interpretation button on the bottom right-hand corner, you can click English or Spanish to hear what she's saying. All right, I will be doing closed captioning in English for the event as well. So if you need closed captions, please private message me to request closed captioning. And a message should pop up on the right side of the main menu with the option to see closed captions. And I will put this message in the chat for anyone who needs it now.
So hi, my name is Adria Vidales. I use they, she pronouns. I am one of the Demeter Seed Librarians of the Demeter Seed Library on campus. And I will be introducing y'all to our workshop. Me and Kelly have been working on this for a little while now, and we're really excited to share with y'all. But yeah, I'll pass it over to Kelly.
Thanks, Adria. Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. My name is Kelly. I use they, she pronouns. I'll describe myself for purposes of access today. I'm an Asian woman with short, dark hair. I'm wearing an olive green t-shirt and a plaid blue and green overshirt, and I'm sitting in the propagation area of the greenhouse. We're doing our best today to increase access to the workshop with Spanish translation and captioning, but just wanted to share it's definitely a learning edge for us, and we know we're not going to be perfect, so we welcome feedback. I'll begin. Our ancestral and community seed legacies are a really great reminder of our connection and responsibility to the land that we care for. So with that, we'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional and unceded territory of the Ayupi tribe of the Awaswas Nation. Today, these lands are represented by the Ama Mutsun tribal band, whose ancestors were taken to Mission Santa Cruz and Mission San Juan Bautista during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast. Today, the Ama Mutsun are working hard to fulfill their obligation to the Creator to care for and steward Mother Earth and all living things through relearning efforts and the Ama Mutsun Land Trust. I briefly wanted to share that on the next slide, there's some information about a current Ama Mutsun campaign to protect Uristock. Uristock is a sacred spiritual and cultural site of the Ama Mutsun. And currently, this land has been purchased by an investment company at a bankruptcy auction, and they're proposing development of a sand and gravel pit mine. And so it's really very, very important to protect this site, both for the spiritual and cultural significance to the tribe, as well as the environmental impacts of the area. And this fall is a really critical time to submit public feedback to the County of Santa Clara. So please visit protecturistock.org for more information. Just a little bit more about myself. Actually, I'll turn it back over to Adria. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. I had forgotten to describe myself for accessibility purposes. So I am a femme-presenting Latinx person wearing eyeliner and brown lipstick in a garage, and there's a bike on my right and the side of a refrigerator on my left. So yeah, some things we wanted to talk about are the broad issues connected to seed and food sovereignty that are deeply ingrained when we talk about seeds and doing this type of work. The first thing I wanted to talk about is colonization. Colonization is not just a one-time thing, but is an ongoing project tied up and foundational in everything that we do. Back in the early stages of colonization of Turtle Island and the Americas and surrounding areas, one tactic of controlling indigenous people that colonizers used was by controlling their food systems and their foodways. One example of this is during Manifest Destiny in the United States, American soldiers and farmers were instructed to slaughter as many bison as they could. And there are videos, or not videos, there are pictures that you can look up of stacks of like thousands upon thousands of bison skulls. And a really important thing, or not an important thing, but the reason that they did that was essentially because bison were a huge aspect of the cultural and food system of Plains Native Americans. So by killing as many bison as they could and putting a reward out for them to kill bison, they were effectively controlling indigenous people and destroying a part of their culture. And colonization also can be seen in the way that, like, even today, large biotechnology companies privatize seeds. So large companies like Monsanto, Syngenta, and Bayer will genetically modify crops and then patent the seed as their own, effectively privatizing the seed, which is largely devastating to small farmers because it takes away their autonomy. They become reliant on the company's seed, and they must continue to buy from them in order to stay afloat. Not only is this devastating to small farmers' autonomy, but it also ravishes the local plant diversity and annihilates the relationships that farmers have to native and heirloom seeds that have been selected for over generations. These biotech companies don't just work within the United States, though. They also are often multinational companies who will prey on small farmers of color around the world in many different countries, and it contributes to the unfair and exploitative relationship that the United States has historically and continues to have with the global South. But yeah. So I'll pass it over to Kellee, who will talk about why we work with seeds.
Hi again, everyone. I'm Kellee, and beyond their pure beauty and magic, there's so many reasons why people are inspired to work with seeds. I wanted to offer the opportunity to you all, if you like, to drop in the chat a few motivations for yourself personally that you may work with seeds. And while there's so many reasons to save seeds on a purely practical basis, these practical reasons can actually be profound political acts. In this image, there's a white bucket with some tecomari beans. They're purple, black, white, gray, and speckled. And this is actually one variety that has a huge range of genetic diversity. In the bottom of the image, that we grew in the garden, one is teff, and one is Ethiopian barley. These are seeds that we've been working with. While folks are sharing in the chat some of their own reasons that they're inspired to save seeds, I wanted to share some of the reasons that I'm personally inspired to work with seeds. For me, seeds are such an amazing way to capture the wisdom of the plants and the land that you're working with. Actually, back to the last slide still.
Sorry.
That captures information from the land and really gives us the ability to create regionally adapted seeds that fit our growing systems. And this is a really important aspect, particularly as we're beginning to experience increasing effects of climate change around the world. For me, seed saving is a really important way to access things that we may not be able to access otherwise, to be able to grow foods that are important to our culture and our community, which are often really not available in the US through commercial, organic, or Western-based seed companies. Saving seed for me is a way to move outside of capitalism and to be able to share food, flowers, and medicine with my community, and to be able to grow food in a highly accessible way. And when you get to save seeds, you're really being able to tap into the amazing creative potential of plants, selecting for traits you want to support and breed, and potentially even be able to create new varieties of things that are adapted to your place and your system. Next slide, please. For me, seed sovereignty is a platform for justice work, and it's a tool to build community power, to reclaim ancestral knowledge and work towards collective liberation. Seed sovereignty is a way to reclaim our agency, community health, protect community knowledge and wisdom, and create self-determination. In this image, this is an altar with various corn cobs, squashes, and feathers that were part of a seed teacher training I did in Colorado back a few years ago. It says, this altar is dedicated to the seed keepers who have worked before and those who will come, sharing their wisdom, insight, knowledge, and experience. For me, this culturally appropriate, biodiverse, healthy seeds that are not controlled by corporations. And it's embracing our ancestral right to be seed keepers. Next slide, please. Okay, in this image, there is a spiral of corn kernels. These corn kernels were gifted to me by a corn fairy and appeared on my desk. So seed sovereignty requires a rejection of patriarchy, capitalism, and white supremacy. Seed sovereignty is a movement that rejects the domination to nature approach that's been so prevalent in industrial agriculture and the reductionist viewpoint that has been applied to industrial seed production. And it rejects violence against women and the earth. Seed sovereignty is an anti-capitalistic movement. Plants produce seed abundantly, which is an active contradiction to the scarcity model of capitalism. And seeds allow us to create our own self-determination in support of our communities. Seed sovereignty pushes against manifestations of white supremacy and homogeneity, and requires the maintenance and celebration of cultural diversity, which is linked to biodiversity. And it's this diversity that we steward, which makes our gardens, farms, and food systems durable and resilient. Okay, I'll turn it back over to Adria at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. So now we're going to share a few organizations who are doing really important seed saving and biodiversity work throughout the world. I'm going to start off by sharing about the Instituto Mesoamericano de Permacultura, or IMAP. They are an ecological education center aimed at ensuring food sovereignty, community development, and the preservation of biodiversity and ancestral knowledge through education on permaculture techniques, local biodiversity, conservation, production of organic food, as well as through a seed bank striving to reconstruct Mayan seed heritage. The image on the left is a slightly blurry picture of a portion of their seed library. The closest jar to us is labeled Chilacayote. And on the right is a group of people learning during a workshop at the Instituto. These are some more pictures that I gathered from their Facebook page. On the top left are a pair of hands holding corn kernels. In the background, it looks like there's compost or some hay or leaves. On the bottom left is another group of people learning about permaculture and how to care and steward for the land. On the left, there are various plants, and on the right, it looks like a bridge of some sort. In the middle is a woman in traditional dress gathering amaranth in the fields from the Instituto. And on the right is another picture of that same amaranth, the top right. And on the bottom right is a group of people learning once again about various techniques. Yeah. The next group that I wanted to share about is called the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance. They were created to bring grassroots practitioners, communities, and organizations together, along with tribal governments, to share, promote, and support best practices and policies that enhance dynamic Native food systems. Housed under the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance is the Indigenous Seed Keepers Network, whose mission is to nourish and assist the growing seed sovereignty movement across Turtle Island, also known as North America. They aim to do this by providing education, mentorship training, outreach, and advocacy support on seed policy issues, and organizing national and regional events and conventions to connect communities engaging in this vital work. On the left is a group of the original founders of the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance. On the right is an image of a basket holding two different types of corn seeds with a blanket in the background with different colored stripes. The card in the middle of the corn reads Upper Midwest Indigenous Seed Keepers Network. And below that it says, our mission is to revitalize cultural seed keeping practices, share educational resources, grow and protect indigenous. We work with over 15 tribes and Native communities in Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Michigan. For more information, please visit www.iskn.org. These are some more images. On the top left is various varieties of corn held inside of a basket. On the bottom left was from a food exchange that was being held. And there is a person holding a whiteboard sign that says Indigenous Foods, Indigenous Chefs. In the middle of the screen is a picture of some corn sprouts freshly sprouting from the ground. Above that, it says hope and resilience and has yellow lines sort of surrounding the corn and the words. And then on the bottom right is the logo for the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance. On the top right, we see a collection of various foods and medicines, such as squash, corn seeds, and flowers. And on the bottom right is a image that was from the Southwest Intertribal Food Summit at the Taos Pueblo in 2018. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Kellee to share their organizations.
Thanks, Adria. I'd like to share a little bit about the work first of the Korean Women's Peasant Association. They work to preserve traditional seed and fight for food sovereignty in Korea. In this slide, you'll see an image which is a painted illustration of a group of women in the Korean Women's Peasant Association. And in the image on the right is a group of women holding various crops and items that are part of their cooperative food distribution markets hub. So Korea experienced a really rapid transformation from an agrarian economy to a highly industrialized economy. This was the result of the government developing trade liberalization policies in the 1980s. In 1994, Korea joined the WTO, or World Trade Organization, which forced the government to eliminate quotas and quotes and tariffs, making the country unable to compete with cheap foreign imports. And this was a huge blow to Korean agriculture and farmers. Today, South Korea is driven by the export sector, with huge companies like Samsung and Hyundai. Next slide. On the image on the left on this slide, there's some more hands holding additional corn. And on the right is a group of Korean women. Today, South Korea is only 20% grain self-sufficient, as the government continues to push the country towards importing cheap food, particularly grains. But South Korean peasants and farmers are fighting for food and seed sovereignty and really working to alter the structure of the food system and decommodify the linkages between consumers and producers. Next slide, please. On this slide, on the top left image, you'll see a group of women farmers organizing their harvest for distribution. On the bottom left, these women farmers are sharing and collecting seeds from one of their native seed bank exchanges. And on the right, there's an image of a older Korean women farmer and a younger generation farmer in the field together. The Korean Women Peasant Association encompasses hundreds of local women farmer groups and really focuses on empowering rural women through seed preservation. The Korean Women Peasant Association created a native seed protection program called the Uiseong Native Seed Protectors to defend against corporate seed takeover. And they were especially compelled by the fight against GMO corn. In this group, each member is responsible for stewarding a couple of crops because nobody can do all the crops on their own. So each person is responsible for a few crops as their life's work. They distribute seeds to low-income farmers and have started a women peasant agroecology school. But at the heart of their work is really intergenerational knowledge sharing, as you see on the image on the right, and sharing traditional knowledge from the older generations to newer generations. They actually developed a mentorship program for grandmothers to be able to share their knowledge of farming and traditional food preparation with younger generations. The Korean Women's Peasant Association is an example of how women's indigenous knowledge is critical for sustainable farming and food sovereignty. Next slide. I'd also like to talk a little bit about the Indonesian Peasant Union, or the Serikat Petani Indonesia in Indonesian. In this slide, in the image on the left, the Indonesian peasants are protesting and the World Trade Organization, or the WTO. So when we talk about the link to colonization and seed, the colonization of Indonesia by the Dutch really set the stage for the Green Revolution and the resulting violence on the land and the people. For instance, the government completely disregarded the traditional water management system called subak in Indonesia. The water management system is for the rice paddy fields, and it's a traditional ecological management system that's cooperatively managed by the community, but it was disregarded during the Green Revolution period by the government, which in this period, the government has been pushing peasants to move towards industrial agriculture and adopt hybrid seeds since the 1970s. The hybrid seeds are replacing thousands and thousands of local varieties. Particularly rice is a struggle and challenge for folks there. 10,000 local rice varieties have disappeared. And in Indonesia, multinational seed companies control over 90% of the commercial seeds. In the early 2000s, farmers were actually jailed for using seeds that they saved on their farm for violating intellectual property laws. The Indonesian Peasant Union fought to release them, though, and change seed laws that do not support farmers, as well as they were fought against the introduction of genetically modified cottonseed in 2001. Next slide, please. So in this slide, on the left and on the top, there are images of Indonesian farmers in their traditional rice fields. Climate change is having huge impacts on peasant farmers who are especially dependent on their local ecosystems for survival. They have to adapt to heat waves, changing temperatures, fluctuating water supplies, and shifting seasonal patterns. And the thing is that commercial seeds are not adapted to these changing conditions, since they are ultimately designed for use in uniform conditions. But rice farmers in the West, as you see in these images, really want to use their own varieties that have been adapted to region and place, and that can withstand the heat and conditions of climate change. So they're working to maintain locally grown rice varieties. another image of Indonesian protests in the streets. Next slide, please. The Indonesian Peasant Union created a national seed center in Bogar, West Java. You can see on the top left image, there's an image of someone showing how to save seed. The right image is actually an exchange between the Korean Women Peasant Association and the Indonesian Peasant Union on sharing information of how to grow seed. At this National Seed Center, they train peasants to select seeds as well as collect seed knowledge from regions around Indonesia and hold peasant learning exchanges, like in the image here. The Indonesian Peasant Union is creating community seed barns, as well as setting up a cooperative for seed distribution. They work on conservation of seed varieties and encourage community work at the seed barns to collect, save, and share seeds. Members have also created a training center in East Java with a greenhouse, see the image on the bottom left, to share knowledge about seed saving and grow seedlings for distribution, especially maize, rice, papaya, chili, eggplant, and long bean. And these seeds are distributed around the country. The Indonesian Peasant Union also provides farmer-to-farmer assistance. Thank you. I will pass it back over to Adria at this point.
Thank you, Kelly. So now for this portion of the workshop, we're actually going to teach you how to save tomato seeds. So we have a couple of Marvel striped tomatoes that Margaret picked up for me from the market. And I cut a few of them open and started fermenting them a few days ago. So I have that here. If you can see, there are seeds on the top and pulp, which have separated from seeds on the bottom. There's also a thin layer of white mold on top. And I have this red towel tied to the top to sort of protect it, but also for air to be able to flow through the towel. So this is after 2 days of fermentation. Yeah, it would usually, I would probably let it ferment another day. But basically after you've let it ferment for a little while, the pulp kind of falls away from the seed and separates inside of the water. And so then you just pour off this top layer, and then you can save the seeds that are on the bottom by pouring them through a strainer and then leaving them to dry on a paper towel. So I'm gonna show you how to do that. I have a glass jar. I have a knife to cut the tomatoes and a towel and a rubber band to cover the top of the jar. So I'm going to start by cutting this tomato in half. It's good to pick the prettiest tomatoes that you can find. Any tomatoes which you would want to grow again, you would select for those by picking them when you're in your garden. And then you're looking for tomatoes that are ripe but not rotting, and that aren't yet like soft but not too soft. So I cut it into a quarter because it's a pretty big tomato, and basically you just squeeze the pulp from the tomato. It's pretty messy. Every time I do this, I always have to kind of like tear open the tomato and then like pour any excess seeds that I can get from the inside. I'm gonna go like, you know, not as slowly as I usually would. But you really want to try and get as much of the pulp and as much of the seeds as you can into the jar. So sometimes you kind of just have to like push your way through the tomato, while also being very grateful to the tomato for providing you with nourishment and these seeds to carry on for the next generation of tomatoes that you grow in the next season. I like to thank all of the plants that I work with. So you can thank the tomatoes or whatever it is that you're saving. This is like a wet method of saving seeds, this fermentation process. There are other ways of saving seeds if you're working with a more dry seed or a dry plant. I'm just gonna, I squeezed tomato juice all over my laptop. But yeah. I believe there's a slide before this one. I think I might have accidentally pushed it forward with the juice. Oh no. Yeah. Hold on. I have to dry my laptop because there's tomato seeds all over. Hold on. Okay. Yeah, so this is a slide that I put together so that you could see what the fermentation looks like after a few days. In the image on the bottom left, there are various types of seeds being saved and fermented. You can see that they all have that white mold sort of growing on top. And that's what you want to see. That mold indicates that it's getting fermented and that it's ready to start saving to pour out. So I'm one tomato down. I have to do the other one still. The image on the right, on the top right, is the same thing. It's another ferment of tomato with a little bit more mold. But it's kind of nice. In the image on the left, you can see the separation between the top layer and the juices on the bottom. And then on the image in the middle, it's just a description of how to save tomato seeds using this fermentation method. So it says in white letters on the top, how to save tomato seeds. And then below that, it says, capture your favorite flavor now to ensure you'll be enjoying it again next summer. The first step, it says, choose the best tomatoes from the plant. Skip anything that is overripe, underripe, or misshapen. 2, cut the tomato in half and squirt out the seeds into a cup of water. 3, let the seeds sit in room temperature water for 3 to 4 days. The slime will start to ferment, allowing the seeds to sink to the bottom. 4, pour out the water, the fermented slime, and any floating seeds. 5, place the seeds that were at the bottom of the bowl onto a sheet of paper to dry. 6, place the seeds in an airtight container along with a small piece of cheesecloth with powdered milk or silica gel in it. That's just to keep the seeds dry. It's really important when you're saving seeds, once you get to the step of actually keeping them in jars, that they stay dry. Otherwise, they'll basically, they can start to grow mold or things like that, just icky things that will make the seed not viable. So it's really important that once you get to the step of putting your seeds in a jar, that they are dry. Finally, you label the seeds. This is step number 7. Label the seeds with the name of the variety and the date that they were collected. If you save seeds, you know that it can get kind of confusing when you have a million jars with different types of seeds, and you can forget really easily what type of seed it is, what specific variety of seed, and when you started saving that seed. So it's really important to label the seeds with when you collected them and what type of seed that it is. And finally, step number 8 is just to keep them somewhere cool. That helps them stay viable for longer. But yeah, I'm not gonna get particularly picky with picking up all the seeds off of my cutting board and putting them into the jar. I'll probably do that after the workshop. But yeah, the infographic is from Timber Press. You can visit them at www.timberpress.com. Here is my jar of tomato seeds. You can add water if you like, but this tomato was pretty juicy, so it has a lot of fluid already in it. So I'm probably not going to add water. But yeah, next you would just get your towel, put it over the top, and then get a rubber band and tie it over the top of the jar. I like to kind of grab the corners of half of it and pull it up around my jar like this. And then I try to tuck them in to the rubber band just because it allows me, because this towel is a little bit big for this jar. So if you wrap it into the rubber band, it kind of provides a little like viewing part on half of the jar. So you just tuck it under the rubber band like that. And then you would just leave this to ferment for a few days. And then when it grows its little mold layer, then you can pour it out and collect the seeds and save them and harvest them and grow them again the next year. So yeah. The isolation distance on tomatoes, the isolation distance is essentially how far away you have to plant one variety of plant from the other variety in order for them to maintain their specific, I guess, traits. Otherwise, they'll begin to crossbreed if they're too close. So if you don't want that to happen, the isolation distance on most tomato plants is 10 feet. Some older varieties require 20 to 25 feet, but you just have to check on the specific type of variety that you plan on growing to see the specific isolation distance that it has. But yeah, thank you for watching my seed demo. With that, we are going to start the Q&A portion of this event. So if you have any questions for me or Kelly, feel free to put them in the chat, and we will start answering them based off of which ones come in first. Yeah. Oh, also, before that, actually, I'm going to pass it over to Margaret. Actually, I don't know. It's like this is like the conclusion slide. So actually, we'll save this, but feel free to read the slide. They're the various organizations that you can, that we would encourage you to donate to if you feel generous. But yeah. Oh, Kelly put in the chat that, well, I'm not sure, Kelly, how long ago Kelly put this in the chat because I didn't have my chat open, but they said that we'll have room for questions. So think of your questions and save them up. Yeah.
While folks are thinking of their questions and putting them into the chat, I'll just share a couple more things about tomatoes from my experience. Tomatoes are a really, really great plant to start saving seed with. Particularly, one thing is that tomato seed is actually quite expensive for the amount of seed that you can get in a small packet. So saving seed for tomatoes is a really good skill. And as Adria mentioned, tomatoes don't have a huge isolation distance requirement. As they said, 10 feet is the minimum, or maybe 25 feet. And if you're being really, really serious about genetic preservation, maybe up to 50 feet. But that's hardly anything wind pollinated, like corn, for example, where you might need 2 miles to isolate the pollen. So when you're thinking about isolation distance for crops, you really want to think about how the crop gets pollinated. Is it by wind? Is it by insects? Or is it self-pollinated? And what the pollination mechanism is, and how likely the pollen is to travel. Somebody asked a question earlier about a tomato being true to its parent. And, you know, that's a tricky question because it actually can depend on the tomato variety. As Adria mentioned, some older heirloom types are more likely to cross. And that's because if you look at their flower structure, the pollen receiving parts of the flower or the stigma actually stick further out of the flower, out of the anther cone, than they do for other tomato varieties. So in terms of looking at how likely your tomato is to cross, you actually want to look at the tomato flowers and look at whether they have an inserted stigma or an exserted stigma. Meaning, is the stigma, the pollen receiving part, enclosed in the anther cone, or is it sticking out of the anther cone and totally exposed to insects? So that'll actually give you some information about how likely your tomato is to be true to its parent if you grow it next to another variety in your garden. So we're starting to get some questions into the chat. So I'll start answering a few questions. Just one other thing about tomato isolation is that if you do have a small growing area and want to maintain genetic, pure genetics for your tomatoes, one technique that people use bag your blossoms, meaning putting them into a paper bag or something that will block pollination in order to prevent tomato varieties in your garden from cross-pollinating. You could also, in theory, remove some tomato blossoms from another particular variety if it's flowering at exactly the same time as the variety that you want to save. So you can either manage isolation by distance, by physical separation, or by time. And this is the case with all the crops that you might want to work with. You just need to think about your strategy and how. And one other quick note about tomatoes. Tomatoes are great because you really only need one plant to have viable seeds, and you can save from that again and again. They're not super prone to inbreeding depression, which is a phenomenon where the genetics of your crop tend to lose vigor after time. This is something that happens a lot with corn if you save from too few ears of corn or too small of a population. So for tomatoes, if you just want viable seeds, you might only need one plant. But if you're trying to maintain your variety, you might want 5 to 10 plants to save seed from. And if you're really trying to capture that genetic seed bank for that variety, you might want up to 20 plants. But that's still a relatively small population size. So tomatoes are a really great crop to start saving seed on and to dive in and really experiment. And you can even create your own crosses if you get really excited about it. So I'll start answering a few questions from the chat. One of the first questions is there a list of the organizations? We'll add a list in the chat right now. The organizations are the Indonesian Peasant Union, the Korean Women's Peasant Association, the Indigenous Seed Keepers Network, I believe, and one more, the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance is part of that, and then the Instituto Mesoamericano de Permacultura. There's a question in the chat about saving sunflower seeds. I read that one should wait until the back of the sunflower seed head turns brown before harvesting, but squirrels and other critters tend to eat the seeds. Thank you for the question. Actually, the animals and the critters and the birds in our gardens and farms are a really amazing indicator of seed maturity. They seem to know just exactly when the seeds are ready to harvest, just when they've fully matured. So there are a couple of different tips to help prevent losing too much seed to birds and or other critters. One, if you're doing a small amount of seed, like sunflower seeds on a flower head, you can actually bag that whole head or put a cover on it so that it can finish maturing before the squirrels or birds eat all the seeds. Depending on the crop, but you can actually cut the entire plant. For instance, I'm growing a perilla crop right now, and we are probably actually going to harvest the entire plant and then let it fully finish maturing in the greenhouse with the seeds still attached to the plant so they can get that last bit of energy, and then process them after that, so that way we don't lose too much seed in the field to either just wind or critters. If there are more questions, feel free to put them into the chat. If there aren't too many other questions, I think Adria and I will share a couple concluding thoughts. I hope that you all enjoyed the examples of different organizations of how people are creating seed sovereignty in their communities. These are some really powerful examples for developing strategies that are community-based in order to save seed. I think there's a lot of amazing creative examples that are happening all over the world that we can look at and learn from. And seed saving is a really amazing lifelong journey that can really help connect you to your community. So I hope that you all are inspired to continue this work. There's a question in the chat: are there resources to learn more about seed sovereignty? Is there anything local? There are a lot of resources to learn about seed sovereignty. One example that has just been put into the chat is about the Richmond, California Seed Bank. There's also the Demeter Seed Library, which Adria is a part of. And in terms of other international efforts, there's a lot of good information on the La Via Campesina website about their seed sovereignty work and what that looks like in different regions around the world. Back to one other important point about thinking about saving seed. We didn't quite mention this fully. There's so much information to consider when thinking about saving seed. But one really important distinction is to know whether your seed is open pollinated or hybrid, whether your seed is coming from a crop that is open pollinated or hybrid. As folks may know, hybrid seeds can be saved, but they will not necessarily come out with genetics that are the same as the plant that you saved from. You know, we can have a process of dehybridization if folks want to work with hybrid seeds. Folks may know about a local example here the tomato that is called Dirty Girl was actually dehybridized from the early girl tomato over generations, and is now sort of a locally adapted dry farm tomato. However, if you have, so this is an important distinction. If you have a hybrid seed, you may or may not want to do that process. Whereas open pollinated seeds are really the foundation of what we're looking at for seed saving. Open pollinated seeds are pollinated through natural means, as we mentioned, either through wind or through insects. And because they have not been hybridized, their genetics are stable and will save truer to type, even though there may be a broader range of genetic diversity. So if you're going to jump in and start the process of saving tomato seed, you do want to know whether your tomato is an open pollinated tomato. Heirloom tomatoes are typically all open pollinated, or a hybrid tomato. A lot of the common red slicing tomatoes come from hybrid genetics. So just a clarification there. I will just share a little bit more about the specific work that I'm doing, and then turn it over to Adria to continue answering questions. In terms of work that I'm specifically doing this year, there's a question about work in the propagation lab. I am working on a project this year to trial and grow out collective of Asian American farmers across the West Coast in collaboration with Seed Savers Exchange and Kitazawa Seeds. And what we are doing is hoping to both conserve and preserve the genetics of the seeds that we're working with. These are seeds that have been in a seed bank for 20, 25, 30 years, and so have not been grown out. So we're working to increase the seed stock, as well as see if there are any cultural or culinary traits of importance. And the collective at large is really working to preserve and steward seeds significant to communities of the Asian diaspora, and expand access to these crops, as well as connect them to their stories and traditional uses. And the name of the plant that I mentioned growing is perilla. Perilla is it's closely related to basil, but it's a really important leaf crop in many Asian traditions. And the one that I'm growing is specifically a traditional Korean perilla.
If anyone has any more questions, I can try answering them to the best of my ability. But if not, I just want to thank y'all for attending, and I hope that y'all enjoyed our event, and I really appreciate y'all for coming into this space. Kellee asked if I can share more about the Demeter Seed Library. So yeah, and how people can get involved. So the Demeter Seed Library started in 2011, and it was started by a grant. I forget what the specific grant was from, but I can look it up. But basically, we just do work based out of the campus of UCSC to promote grower autonomy and seed sovereignty, and by extension food sovereignty. It was the Strauss Foundation was where we got the grant from in 2011. But yeah, we promote grower autonomy and seed sovereignty and food sovereignty by having a space where we collect native and heirloom seed varieties and then distribute them to the best of our ability to local growers, gardeners, students, and community members. People can get more involved with us. Usually we have, if you're a UCSC student, usually we have a remote or an internship, but because of COVID-19, CASFIS, which is the Center for Agroecology, Sustainable Food Systems, they are doing kind of like one big remote internship to kind of serve as like a survey for, it's like a replacement for all of the FISWIG organizations and all of their internships. So you get to learn about basically like all of the organizations that do work relating to the food system and sustainability on campus. So if you're interested in that, you can email me or Margaret, and we can get you enrolled in that class. It's starting, well, this is the first week of classes, so it's starting soon, next week. But yeah, if you're interested, I can leave my email in the chat and Margaret's email in the chat. And yeah, Margaret says the deadline to enroll is October 14th. There is another question about how can community members get or donate seeds to the Demeter Seed Library. So you can reach out to our email. I'll leave it in the chat too. It's demeterseedlibrary@gmail.com. Just start to get in communication with us. This quarter, it is a little bit more difficult because we have to get permission to go on campus, but both of the seed librarians are in Santa Cruz now, so we could get onto campus with permission and retrieve seeds and then probably mail them to you. It would be a little bit more difficult to donate seeds because I'm not sure if the mail room is working on campus right now. It probably is, but I don't know because we're based out of Oaks. I'm not sure if the Oaks mail room is working right now. So you would just have to email us, and if you are interested in donating, we would just be in communication about how to do that, but it would probably be sending it to one of the seed librarians. So yeah. Anything else I want to share? I am fairly new to seed saving. I started this work for me personally around, well, I've always been I grew up around agriculture, and my family worked as agricultural labor for a couple of generations, and well, honestly, for a lot of generations. So this work is very personal to me, but I started doing it more seriously about a year ago when I started as an intern for the Demeter Seed Library. And then a position opened up in the spring, and I started working as an official Demeter Seed Librarian. So I haven't been doing this work for a super long time. But yeah, every day I'm like learning something new. And I think that it's just a really incredible journey. And I feel like so called to do this work. And if you also like feel called in a similar way, that's probably why you're here. But yeah, you can always feel free to reach out to any of us if you're like needing help or guidance about anything. And we'll share space with you and talk about seeds and have a good time. But yeah, as for that, I'm just very glad that you guys came. Thank you for coming, Summer. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate all of y'all for attending. It's an honor to be able to teach and share knowledge with everybody. Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna share my email now, so if you hear me typing, that's why. Oh, shoot.
I just wanted to reshare again in case folks missed the beginning part. There's a current campaign to protect Uristock, a sacred site of the Amamutsun tribal band. And a really important time for feedback to the County of Santa Clara is right now, this fall. So they have to respond to public feedback about the site, which is a proposed site for a sand and gravel mining pit. So if folks can check out the website, it is protecturistock.org. There's a lot more information about how to support the campaign of the Amamutsun tribal band and how to get involved. Otherwise, I will turn it back over to Margaret to share some concluding information.
I'll take a break on the closed captioning, but I'll also repeat what I say in the captions for folks, but just thank you so much all for attending this session. And if you all don't know, it's part of a larger event happening this week, the Harvest Festival that the Center for Agroecology and Sustainable Food Systems is partnering on, along with Food Systems Working Group, which is the umbrella organization that hosts the Demeter Seed Library, amongst others. And also Life Lab is hosting a number of family-friendly sessions that you're welcome to attend. And yeah, we are just so glad that you came. And I'll put the link in the chat to register for all the other sessions this week. We're going to have some musical performances as well. There's one tomorrow by Diana Gameros, who's an amazing singer-songwriter. And then on Friday, we have a band from San Jose playing Another May. So please check them out if you are available. And we're encouraging all participants to donate to a number of fire relief efforts as we are kind of reeling from fire season in California this year. And as you all know, the CCU fire in Santa Cruz County in the Santa Cruz Mountains affected many folks, and specifically the Amamutsun tribal band lost their kind of organizing space. So we are linking their donation for their land trust in the chat, or in this slide, and then I'll also put the links in the chat. And then also there's a relief effort for California family farmers through the CAF.org foundation. So please donate to them if you want to support California farmers. There's the United Way Fire Relief Fund for all of Northern California, and specifically the Bay Area, and the Santa Cruz Foundation has a fire relief fund as well, specifically for Santa Cruz County. So if you feel called to support fire relief efforts, please consider donating to one of these funds. And I'll put the links in the chat so you can easily click on them as well. But yeah, thank you all so much for coming. We'll end a little bit early. I think this session maybe had a little bit less questions than we expected. So if you all have any last lingering questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we can see if we can answer them before we go. But if not, thank you all so much. And I will put the recording of this session on YouTube, as well as just send you all the audio and video files. So yeah.
I'm gonna stop sharing my screen if that's okay. Yeah? Okay. Cool.
All right. I think most folks are hopping off, so I'll just send the information out in an email follow-up. All right. Well,
Thank you, everybody. Happy seed saving.
Yes. Happy seed saving.
thank you all so much. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Adria. Thank you, Carmen. we will see you all soon. All right, take care.
Thank you, y'all. Goodbye.
Bye.